Alright guys, here are our video notes for introductions to what a function looks like. Alright, so we looked at this in class. Alright, so here is a vending machine, and the vending machine has different candy bars in it with different buttons to push to get that specific candy bar. So we need to look at some definitions. Alright, first of all, we don't need to know what a dependent variable is. And if you recall, when we talked about that, the dependent variables are your y values. We also call them your ranges. Okay? And we also said that it is called your output values, output values. So the bigger you make your vocabulary, the easier it is to answer these questions. All of these words mean the exact same thing. So when you get stuck on the word dependent, ask yourself, what is the output of this situation? And the output in this situation are the candy bars. Now, the independents are going to be your x values. They are going to be called the domains, and those are your input. Alright? Again, if you build your vocabulary, then the easier it is to answer. So if we're looking for the independent variable, we need to figure out, well, what are the inputs to give me my candy bars? And the input values are going to be the key codes. Alright, now you have to be careful because a lot of people in class were saying that the input has to be the money. The input is the key codes because it's the key codes that give you your specific candy bar. Alright, so now it says describe if this is a function. Well, when we looked at our vending machine, we have to know what a function is first. And a function is for every one input, you have one and exactly one output. So when we're looking at this, we look at each one of our inputs on the candy bar. Each input has an individual output. So even though we look at this and we have two Snicker bars that can come out of the vending machine, each one is a different input. So therefore, this is a function. So when we're going to describe this, we're going to say that yes, this is a function because every input has exactly one output. And that's what a function is. For every one input, you have one and only one output. Alright, so now we're going to take a look and see what a function looks like in a graph. So when we are looking at this, we would normally call this our x-axis, and we would normally call this our y-axis. But we need to get used to not always using x's and y's. So we have to build our vocabulary. Because if you're talking distance and time, you're going to use d and t, not x's and y's. So to figure out what's going to go there, build your vocabulary. Your key codes, we said, are our input values. We can call them the domains, but they can also be called our independents. Alright? So our key codes are going to be A1, B2, C3, D2, E4, A5, and C1. Now, our y-axis is going to be our outputs. It can also be called our dependence, and it can also be called the range. Okay? So, our outputs are going to be the candy bars. S for Snickers, M for Milky Way, K for Kit Kat, 100 for 100 grands, C for Crunches, A for almonds. Now, here's where the confusion happened. There's 2 Snicker bars in the vending machines. So the question is, do you list each one? Snicker bar here and a Snicker bar up here. And the answer is no, because if we were using numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, if the number 2 repeated itself, you're not going to list the number 2 on the number line twice. It's already represented. So you do not repeat the Snickers that is twice in the vending machine either. So when we look at this, if I hit A1, I get my Snickers. B2, I get my Milky Way. C3, Kit Kat. D2, 100 grand. E4 is my Crunch. A5 is my Almond Joy. But when I hit C1, I still get a Snickers. So now when we look at this, we want to see, does this represent a function? Well, looking at the graph, each input has one and only one output, even the C1. So therefore, it is a function in the graph. Now, the easiest way to check a graph is by using the vertical line test. Now, what the vertical line test does is if you draw a line vertically, straight up and down, and you hit your data once and only once throughout your graph, then it is a function. So if I draw a line straight through, I'm hitting my data one time and only one time only. So therefore, this graph is a function. I hit my data once every time. Now to look at it as a mapping. In a mapping, here we're using the word input, but remember, inputs are x values, inputs are our domains, inputs are our independent variables. Outputs are our y values, they are our ranges, and our dependent variables. So here we're going to list what our inputs are. And again, it's the key codes. A1, B2, C3, D2, E4, A5, and C1. Our outputs are the candy bars. Snickers, Milky Way, Kit Kat, 100 grand, Crunch, Almond Joy. And again, I do not repeat the Snickers, even though there were 2 Snickers in the vending machines. It's already represented, so I don't repeat it. Now I just map it. If I hit A1, I'm going to get a Snickers. B2, Milky Way. 3, Kit Kat. D2, 100 grand. E4, Crunch. A5 gives me an Almond Joy, but my C1 goes all the way back to the Snickers. But this is still a function because each input had only one of these outputs. Even though A1 and C1 give me the same output, they're individual inputs. They're separate from each other. So this is still a function. So the easiest way to think about it is you focus on your domains, your inputs. They should only have one arrow pointing from each one. Now your domains and your ranges. Remember, your domains are your X values. We can also call them your inputs, and they can also be called the independent variables. So we're going to list our inputs. Again, are our key codes: A1, B2, C3, D2, E4, A5, and C1. Those were the key codes in the vending machine. The range are our Y values. We can call them our outputs. We can call them the dependent variable. So we're going to list them. Now I'm going to list each one. So I have A1 is going to give me a Snickers, B2 gives me my Milky Way, C3 gives me my Kit Kat, D2 gives me my 100 Grand, E4 is going to give me my Crunch, A5 gives me my Almond Joy. Now I'm going to rewrite the Snickers right here so that we see that it's okay that I'm going to repeat in my range. What we're focused on is our domains, our inputs. You cannot repeat an input value. So as long as your input values do not repeat, it is a function. You can repeat here, just not in your domains. All right, now let's look at the next vending machine. The next vending machine is different. This vending machine has Snickers, Milky Ways, Kit Kats, 100 Grands, Crunches, Almonds, and Butterfingers. But if you look carefully, this one says there's something wrong. And it's right here. A1 repeats twice, which means this vending machine, when A1 is punched, might give you a Snickers, but it might also give you a Butterfinger. So this one input could give you multiple outputs. So to answer the first question on the what's wrong page, the vending machine has two A1 values. So to describe if this is a function or not, no, it is not a function because the input A1 has multiple outputs. Now we're going to put it on a graph. Again, this is your X and this would be your Y, but we're going to go ahead and label our vocabulary also so we can build our vocabulary. This is inputs. We can call it our domain, but it can also be called our independent variables. This is our Y values, which can also be called our outputs. It can be called our dependent variables, and it can also be called a range. All right, so we're going to go ahead and label our key codes. So we're going to label A1, B2, C3, D2, E4, A5,